amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. My guest today is Candida Baker, who has a very special relationship with horses and other animals. As a journalist, feature writer and reviewer, she contributes frequently to the Sydney Morning Herald, as well as to numerous other publications. She was the editor of the Weekend magazine and the Australian newspaper, and she has published numerous books across all genres. Her third novel, Light and Shadow, was published in Australia last year, and her previous book was a memoir, The Heart of a Horse, which not only tells her relationship with the many horses who've come into her life, but also other animals. Welcome, Candida.
Thank you, Rosemary.
An absolute pleasure to have you here chatting to us. Now, you were born into a literary family in England. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was literary and theatrical. My father was an actor and also a writer and director, but primarily an actor. My mother was a costume designer, but her father, my grandfather, was a poet and an essayist, Sir John Squire, in England, and also a noted journalist. So the theatre and books. So my father was a great lover of horses. So horses and books and art and all that were very closely around in my childhood.
Oh, how lovely. And you said, I was going to talk about your father being very much a horse enthusiast, and it comes across in your book, Candy, that even when you were in Australia, that, he was very much part of your life and your son's life with horses. But your first book, along with my first book that I can really remember, was Black Beauty. And that's what really sort of started your love with horses, sort of made you more enthusiastic about them. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. I actually, I remember being sat up on a very large horse when I was about 18 months old, when we were driving down a country lane and we passed a farmer on his horse, and I cried because I wanted my parents to stop the car, which they actually did. And they asked the farmer, would he take me up in front of him on the horse, which he did, very obligingly. And then apparently I wouldn't stop crying after I got off the horse. So even before Black Beauty, but then when I was in hospital having my tonsils out, when my father came to read me Black Beauty on his visits, because in those days, you might remember or not, when you had your tonsils out, it was a major operation. You had to stay in hospital for 10 days.
And you got ice cream.
And you got ice cream and jelly, which made you sick.
That's right.
And then within a couple of days, you were kind of bouncing off the walls. And yes, I remember it clearly that it was a very peculiar time being stuck in this hospital room for so many days. Anyway, my dad would come and read me Black Beauty, and that really I just loved it. And that really, I suppose, was part of the journey. But I think the journey was in my DNA, to be honest.
It almost as though you're born. I actually learnt to ride on a donkey in Ireland many, many, many years ago, and then went on to ride horses for many years. So I think it's sort of all, as you say, almost in your DNA, isn't it?
Yeah, so my great-grandfather bred Cleveland Bays in Yorkshire, and I knew that he'd done that, but I didn't know much more than that. And then for about 3 years, I was editing a horse magazine called Horse Vibes, and we did a story on Cleveland Bays, and I thought I might just do a bit of research. And I found all the old show results of my great-grandfather with his horses at all the local agricultural shows in Yorkshire, winning ribbons with his young horses, which was amazing.
Oh, how wonderful. So it's, you definitely come from a horsey family. Now, why did you come to Australia, and when did you come to Australia, Candy?
Well, I first came to Australia, so I wanted to act initially, and I was offered a job when I was 20 as an understudy on a Royal Shakespeare Company tour, coming overland and ending up in Australia for 3 months, and we travelled by bus, 7 of us, around New South Wales and Queensland and ACT, and that just kind of reinforced for me I'd always been interested in coming to Australia, and I'd been working and living in France for a year for a show jumper.
Right.
And when I came here, everywhere we went on the theatre tour, people would say, "What do you want to do?" And I'd say, "Ride a horse." So I rode, I rode horses in the cane fields up near Roma. I mustered sheep near Orange, all over the place. I had
Oh,
all sorts of adventures. I even rode a horse, believe it or not, in Kathmandu.
oh, really?
Yes,
Oh, how
probably the only horse in Kathmandu at the time.
oh, how lovely! And I think I'm right in thinking that your first book was called Women and Horses.
Yes, and that was a novel, and it was a dual timeline, which is something which, if we come up to date with Light and Shadow, my most
Yes,
recent
we will
novel, and
definitely.
The Hidden, which is my second novel, I seem to enjoy these past and present timelines. So in Women and Horses, the Arthurian legend of Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot runs alongside the contemporary timeline of a couple who get involved in an eternal triangle and the difficulties thereof.
Right. I mean, you've been very much been able to sort of incorporate your writing career, not just with horses, but also with a professional career, because you were director, if I'm right, of the Byron Bay Writers Centre. You started Veranda magazine and a book reviewer. And you've also written children's books. Is that right, Candy?
Yes, those things are all completely correct. I was director of the Byron Bay Writers Festival in 2011, and it was a pretty massive festival. We had lots of amazing guests. And yes, I ran an online magazine, which I started myself for about 7 years. And finally, I got tired.
Right. Fair enough.
And journalism has always been, look, I've had an amazing career in journalism. And journalism has always been very good to me, and I've been very lucky. I still write for the Good Weekend fairly regularly.
Right. Yes, I read your
Uh,
article not last week, I think, in the Good Weekend.
yeah, well, I had an article in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, which was
Yes.
about
Yes.
my
About your
long,
latest book.
yes, my long hiatus from fiction writing due to owning too many horses,
Oh,
basically.
I can understand that, and we'll certainly come to that in a minute. But now we will go to your latest book, which is called Light and Shadow, which is about the acclaimed photographer Edward, but spelt Eadward, Mubridge. How do you pronounce it?
Mybridge.
Mybridge, isn't it? Yes. Now, he was famed, of course, for capturing the first motion image of a galloping horse in full motion, but also for murdering his wife's lover. And that's just come out. So can you tell us a little bit more about it's a fascinating book, so tell us a bit more.
Well, what initially drew me to the story was, as many people do who love horses, I discovered this extraordinary image taken by Edward Mybridge, who was a very famous Victorian photographer. But he'd captured this exact moment when a horse is galloping where all four hooves are off the ground. So it actually, at once, so it actually looks as if the horse is flying. And up until then, as you may recall in the old prints and paintings of
Yes.
horses, when they were galloping, they were often shown completely anatomically incorrectly with the front legs out in front and the back legs out behind. Whereas, of course, actually, when they're galloping, all four legs are underneath them
Right, right.
for a very split second. And for a very split second, millionth of a second, I don't know, all four hooves are off the ground. And it's an amazing photograph. It remains an amazing photograph. His most famous one, I should think, other than perhaps his Yosemite ones. And so I was very intrigued by that photograph, and I started. I didn't really have the idea of a novel at that time. I was just interested in the photography, and I started looking at more and more of his horse photographs. And then I read Rebecca Solnit's amazing biography of Edward Mybridge, and discovered this extraordinary story where he'd married a woman when he was 40 who was half his age, and then promptly gone off about his photographic career, leaving her in San Francisco, where she was seduced by a kind of black sheep, Harry Larkins, who was a very attractive and dashing man about town.
Right.
And when Edward and Flora had a son, at some point the paternity of the son came into question, and Edward was incensed with rage and went to where Harry was then currently living and shot him dead.
An extraordinary thing, and he was actually never found guilty, was he? Although he admitted his guilt.
That's right. It was an extraordinary thing because he was acquitted by an all-male jury on the grounds of justifiable homicide, even though the judge had said the only way that you can find this man not guilty is by virtue of insanity.
Right.
But they didn't do that. They went against the judge's direct orders, if you like. So he walked off scot-free, and within a year, Flora had died penniless, and then Edward picked up their son and took him to an orphanage in New York, where he languished 10 years, and then took him to a ranch in Texas, where he spent the rest of his life, the son, Florado. And Edward never saw him again, but he did leave him when he died, his stopwatch.
I know, I saw that, yes.
Which is a kind of telling little thing, because so there were all these little tiny things which said to me, wow, what were the emotions that were attached? Because I'm a very, and more as I get older, for the good or the bad, a very emotional and intuitive writer. And I began to think, what were all the emotions that were flying around? I mean, was Edward really in love with Flora? Was she really in love with him? You know, what?
Yes.
How did this all play out? How did it come about? And that's when I chanced on the idea of, well, what if Florado, who did never marry and never had a relationship as that is recorded, but I mean, he died when he was 55.
Yes.
What if he did have a relationship? What would that look like? Would there be a child from that relationship? And if so, who's she? And that's how my contemporary, vaguely contemporary storyline was born, with Rosa making her presence felt in the book.
Absolutely, and you marry it very, very well together. But one of the things you, Candy, you also say is that you're surprised at how often women in history are lost or forgotten, or in actual fact just sort of fall by the wayside.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think if there's a plus side to social media, Facebook, I mean, I think these things are written by AI, to be honest, because they all have the same kind of tenor to them. But there's an amazing proliferation of stories about extraordinary women across Facebook at the moment, which I don't know if you've noticed, but pointing out how many women have invented extraordinary things, done extraordinary things, been responsible for, breaking codes in wartime, all sorts of things that we never learn in school. We learn about the men.
Exactly. But now, you're quite right. Now, I mean, with social media and so many other forms of media out there, it is becoming more well known, isn't it?
It is. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to relate into young men necessarily treating young women better than they used to, or there being in general, it seems to me as an older woman that feminism is not the mighty force it once was. I think women are still fighting for their place in the world. And one of the things I explore in the book is also this idea of female shame, because I think that women carry shame in a very different way to the way that men do.
Yes, quite possibly. You're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Candida Baker, writer and horse listener. Now, Candy, I loved reading Heart of a Horse. I mean, as I said before, I learnt to ride on a very stubborn donkey in Ireland, but went on to ride many horses. But reading your book, in The Heart of a Horse, I seem to learn so much more about the relationship, basically, between people and horses. So you wrote that about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, didn't you?
Yes, it was published in 2021.
And it really is, to me, it's a true inspiration of how a horse and its owner can interact. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I don't necessarily even think it's a horse and its owner. It's a
Yeah,
horse and someone who will drop into the same space as the horse and communicate with the horse in a way that the horse feels heard.
right.
And I can give you an example of a very recent example. So over the last couple of weeks, I've done 3 horse sessions with 3 different horse people, and for different reasons. One was a horse that didn't want to load on a horse float. Another was a horse that's become a bit difficult under saddle. Another was a horse that didn't want to go into water. And on each of these occasions, what I found was that even though the owners were very kind, or are very kind, emotionally conscious people, they were using too much force.
All right,
They,
right. Mm.
they weren't giving the horse a chance to understand the question. And this is a big thing in horse communication or horse listening or horse whispering or whatever you want to call it. It's like, ask the question, give the horse a chance to understand what you're asking it to do and to make a choice to do it.
Right, right.
And when you do that, very often the force, well, almost always, the force becomes completely unnecessary because force and horses don't really mix well. And that's unfortunately one of the lessons that I learned from my father, who was a very forceful rider and a very forceful horse person and resorted to force. And I would watch as a child these terrible fights that he would have with horses. And I think even then think there must be a better way. So, horses, although they're large, they're very soft
Right.
beings.
Yes.
They're highly sentient and psychic, and their heart energy goes out a very, very long way. And what they put up with humans riding them and competing them, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, by the way. I'm not
No.
I'm not saying horses should just exist, out there in the universe and do nothing. I absolutely don't think that. I think horses love to have a job. It doesn't really matter what that job is. They enjoy the interaction with humans. So
That comes
um,
across very much in your book, Candy. Yes, that they do enjoy it.
yes, they do. And but the thing is, a horse's language is physical and our language is verbal. And so to join a horse in its world, you need to understand its physical language and be able to become a leader for the horse, because that's what horses really want in their
Right.
lives. They want a leader because a leader helps them feel safe and secure. And once they feel safe and secure with you, then you can become softer and softer because they trust you when you
Yes.
ask them a question or ask them to do something, that you have their best interests at heart.
But they can almost smell your fear, can't they? Because certainly now that I'm older and get on well, I haven't been on a horse for ages, I might add, but last time I got on a horse, I was terrified. Even though as a child, I spent my life on a horse, and I noticed straight away that the horse could smell or could, sort of work out that I was frightened, and it upset it.
Yes, they get anxious.
Mm.
So one of the big things with horses is breathing out.
Yes.
That is a major thing, whether you're riding them or on the ground with them. When you breathe out, it settles your nervous system. But interestingly, I have one horse because I do what they call equine facilitated learning, which is the sort of therapeutic modality which I got a qualification in to put around my natural horsemanship skills. One of my horses, who was a personal rescue, who had very severe PTSD when I got her, and still has what we call Safi moments, where she'll suddenly decide that having the visor on is actually going to kill her, and she really can't cope at all.
Right.
Um, Although she has less and less these days, but she has a very odd thing because she's my best therapy horse. Because when she's with someone who's nervous or frightened on the ground, she senses it and she calms right down.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So she's really taught me that, you know, the thing of, the horse can sense your fear, the horse can, well, yes, she senses it, but she literally almost says to the person, it's okay, you're safe with me,
oh, that's
which is so
absolutely.
lovely.
It's lovely. I was going to go, but unfortunately, we haven't got all that much time, so I can't go into too much details. But I loved your horse Bo. I loved your son's horse Johnny, and then of course
Oh.
there was Eva and her injury. So, and you had a lot of trouble coping with Eva's injuries, didn't you? Because they were hard to treat.
Eva is my $1,000, $15,000 vet bill horse. So you'll be
Right,
pleased to hear that Eva made the trek west of the range from the Byron region, where I lived for 22 years, over to the Armidale region.
right.
And, what can I say? I absolutely thank God at the moment, or goddess, that she's relatively free of injury. She's my wonderful, and she can't really have a job in the normal sense of the word because of her injuries. But what she is she's the matriarch of the herd.
Oh, how lovely. And that's an important role to play, isn't it?
It's a very important role to play, and she and I are very, very close, and I absolutely love her to pieces. And some people, I'm sure that some people would have made the choice to have her put to sleep
Well, it was a
with the.
lovely part of your book reading about the love and care that went into healing her. You're a great believer in essential oils and Reiki healing, aren't you? I mean, tell us a little bit about how that works with a horse.
Well, horses, very simply, as you can tell by looking at their heads, have a huge olfactory system. So their eustachian tubes are, however many times larger than ours. So smell is incredibly important to a horse.
Right.
And so that's why the essential oils work so well on them. The thing I would say is that, yes, I do Reiki energy work, essential oils. I tend to use natural stuff, but it's not to say that I'm against mainstream medicine. I mean, my horses' lives have been saved. Well, Eva's life has been saved by, a veterinary intervention and antibiotics. And, so it all goes into the mix of what's best for the horse. But the thing with the essential oils is that horses love them and they have a very calming effect on horses as they do on humans. So often, if I'm running a little workshop and we're doing essential oils, the people are smelling the oils too, and they're not even realizing that they're getting a bit of a treatment while their horse is busy relaxing.
Oh, how lovely. I just recently had a beautiful Irish girl staying with me who is a physiotherapist, but she's decided she's going to go back to Ireland and to try and go down to the Curragh, where, of course, horses are, so much part of that area, and become a physiotherapist for a horse, or for horses, I should say. So I was telling her about your book and about the essential oils and the Reiki and whatever, and so she was fascinating. So she's got a copy of your book.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Well, I'm in Ireland. My grandmother was Irish, and I've spent a bit of time in Ireland. And lucky you growing up there and riding on a donkey. I think Ireland is the most beautiful place, and they have wonderful horses there. And the Irish tend to treat their horses very well. So, good on her for going to do that. I think becoming a physiotherapist with horses is really important because a lot of people forget, and I see this over and over again, particularly with rescue horses, that we sit on their backs.
Yes.
And if their saddle doesn't fit properly, or if we're too heavy for them, or if we ride them too young, or if they've got a niggling injury that they're not telling us about, all of these things will add up to a horse being in pain and uncomfortable, and that will lead to what you might describe as unwanted behavior because the horse is trying to tell you, I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
So physiotherapy, osteopathy, acupuncture, all of that stuff, it's very, very important for horses.
It is, absolutely. Now, I was fascinated that she was going to do that. Now, Candy, I volunteered with Riding for Disabled for a number of years, and I was fascinated to read in your book how some of the rescued Brumby horses sort of ended up being great riding horses for Riding for Disabled. I wasn't sort of aware of that.
No, well, I mean, the thing with Brumbies is that in the wild, they have incredibly tight family bonds, obviously.
Yes.
So if a Brumby is taken from the wild relatively kindly and introduced to domestic life relatively kindly, it will transfer that affection on to its new, in quotes, family, which it sees as being its humans.
Right.
And in a way that in some domestic horses find more difficult. So Brumbies are incredibly loyal because they're incredibly loyal in the wild.
Right, yes, that comes across. And unfortunately, as you've said in your book, there's so much controversy at the moment and the culling of Brumbies and whatever. So it was a lovely part to be able to read that some of them are being, sort of brought back into mainstream society and, going into riding for disabled and becoming children's horses.
Yeah, I mean, they have a massive range of things that they can do. Sometimes they're a bit too old to adjust to a riding or working life, but they've just started taking horses again out of the Guy Fawkes National Park, which is not far from where I am.
Right.
And I've actually went to see the first intake. They hadn't taken any out since the fires, so the population's built up. But they're going. They're going to be rehomed.
Right.
They're not being aerially culled, thank God.
Oh, that's lovely to know.
Yeah. So the thing in the Snowy Mountains that I find sad is that some of the oldest bloodlines of horses in Australia are there, and this indiscriminate culling, I think, is just a terrible thing that's happening.
It's very well. It is. It's very, very sad. I mean, we introduced them to Australia, didn't we? Right at the very beginning, well, not right at the very beginning, but it's
right
just
at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right at the very beginning, there was a horse on the first fleet with the first fleet and a Arabian.
Yes, actually, yes, the first time since the Federation, basically. Candy, Paul is waving at me through the window there to say that we are running out of time. So I just want to quickly go and tell our listeners where you can be contacted. And your webpage is candidabaker.com, that right?
Yes, that's correct.
She's also, or you are also on Facebook, I should say, and Instagram. Her latest book is Light and Shadow, and the one before, which we've talked about as well, of course, is called Heart of a Horse. And I might add out, apart from horses in the heart of a horse, there are many, many animals that Candy talks about, which we can have the most beautiful relationships with. And it's a fascinating book. I have to say, I really did enjoy reading it, Candy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rosemary.
And look, thank you very much for being my guest today. And this program has been recorded in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia and will be available on my YouTube channel, Lots to Chat About, with Rosemary Peterswald. Thank you very much again, Candy. Again, her books are Light and Shadow and The Heart of a Horse. That's not all of Candy's books, of course, but they're the two that we've sort of discussed today. So thank you, Candy, very much for being my guest.
Thank you, Rosemary. That was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, that was lovely. And thank you, Paul, for producing.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.